everybody, and welcome to another edition of Kevy's Corner, Kevykev's Corner. I'm Kevykev, glad to have you with us. And of course, we're in the midst of election season, and so we have some terrific guests joining us today on the show, and they're going to give us some insight, thoughts on the election, the process, and where we headed, because we continue to hear that this election is like none that we've seen in history. So joining us today, we're glad to have him back, is author Pierre Blaine. He has a brand new book out. It is called Civics for Our Time, and we're so glad to have him. Pierre, how you doing?
Very good. Glad to be back with you again.
And it's always great, and you were at a great time. It looks like you published your book right at the right time, right in the heat and the heart of this election.
Yeah.
And so tell everybody about the book and some insights on what they're going to get from your new book, Civics for Our Time.
Well, Civics for Our Time is a narrative that talks about how our government is supposed to work. And I was concerned about the fact that I think that sometimes we really don't understand how our system is supposed to work. And the reason why that's important is because you need to have a framework of how our system is supposed to work so that it will inform you and empower you so that you can make important decisions, especially during an election time like we're in right now. So I wanted to kind of lay that out so that you can have a lens, a prism through which to analyze this stuff, because we're in my opinion, a very dangerous time because we are, experiencing issues related to AI. We have a lot of misinformation and disinformation through social media. And so therefore, if you do not have a lens for yourself in terms of being able to analyze what's going on, then you're going to be lost if you are just getting your news and information from just one source. If you are going to just use social media to inform you about what's going on, then you're going to be ill-equipped to be able to deal with the issues that we have right now. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most important elections that we have had in our lifetime. Of course, most people's eyes will roll over in their head because we always say that. But for real, I think that this is a very serious election, and we have got to be clear about what we're going to do in 2024.
Well, let me ask you this, because you talked about that lens and how you're hoping that we're able to see the correct lens, but it seems to me that you're saying that this lens at the present time must be a little bit out of focus or a little blurred. What are the areas where you see that maybe we have kind of lost being able to see clearly?
Well, I mean, part of the reason is that we are distracted. You know, you look and you walk down the street, most people can't even walk across the street without looking into their telephone.
Okay.
And so we're very distracted, okay?
Right.
Well, if you're that distracted, a lot of times you're not in a position where you're not even focused on what, the election is about. And so as a result of that, we are, you hear people say, well, I'm confused or I'm not, clear about what it is that I'm going to do. But if you understand the way our system is supposed to work, if you listen to what the candidates are saying, they're giving you a clue about what it is we should be doing in this particular election.
Talking to you, I know you had some concerns, reservations about candidates, and especially when a candidate says that the thought is about throwing away the Constitution. Can you maybe expound on that a little bit?
Well, and that's my whole point. My whole point is that if you understand the way our system is supposed to work, then when you have a candidate that says to you, the first thing that I want to do is get rid of the Constitution, that ought to raise a red flag for you in terms of how you're going to vote in this particular election. So there's no reason to be confused, especially in an election where, a former president actually demonstrates to us the type of president he's going to be. In other words, if you have a person who did not want to leave office when they lost the election, that is seeing a person that has indicated exactly what we can expect from them. And of course, I'm telling people, don't even look at this as being a normal election. You have a person that basically has stated that they want to be a dictator, that has stated that they want to get rid of the Constitution, And if you understand the way our system is designed and it's supposed to work, that lets you know that in our system, it's designed for us not to have a dictator. It's designed for us not to have somebody who wants to be a king. And so that's the way the system was designed. And if you understand that, then it informs you, it empowers you as the way forward that we should be going in 2024.
So what does that say to you then, as somebody who studies history and civics and writes on these topics, has authored books on these topics, when you have a situation where a large number of people in the country are in agreement with what you're saying is what we should be concerned about? When you look back at the elections, the results, total numbers from 2020, and Joe Biden right there at nearly 80 million votes, but Donald Trump right there over 75 million votes. So obviously, a lot of people are thinking that way. So what do you say as somebody that studies history, writes about it, when obviously a lot of people are in agreement with some of those policies, right?
Well, okay, first of all, you have to look at, the candidates. I mean, if you are concerned about, the presentation that somebody is making, but you're not paying attention to the content of what they're saying, then you can go and make a mistake as it relates to whether or not that person should be leading us. If a person, while in office, basically didn't understand that he was the leader of the free world, meaning that he was admiring people who were dictators, then that ought to be a red flag for you that person cannot lead this country, because we are supposed to be the gold standard for democracy in the world. And quite frankly, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that, some organizations, international organizations that study this, are saying that we are a backsliding democracy, meaning that when you look at what's going on in some of the red states as it relates to some of the state legislatures, they are taking us back. When you look at what's going on with women's rights as it relates to their bodies, we're going back. When you look at our voting rights and legislatures trying to take away our voting rights, we're going back. And so therefore, we have to make the determination that we're not going to go back, and that we're going to put somebody in office that is going to lead us in a very difficult world that we find ourselves in right now.
It would appear too that the Harris-Walz team has said, you heard them say, and they did this at the convention, we're not going back. So they definitely right there with your words there. So as you break it down, and I know you talk about all these topics in your book. The new book is Civics for Our Time, and you look at that situation with these candidates. What would you say to the person who might say, I don't see much difference between the two parties, and I don't like either candidate, and I'm going to sit this out? We certainly heard a lot of that before Kamala Harris entered on the Democratic side, when people were talking about President Biden and former President Trump. I'm sure you heard many people gave that thought about, I would sit this out. But then when you take it into the account that you talk about voting rights, that's a whole nother dynamic when you think about what people had to go through, giving up their lives for that right. But I want to know, what do you think? My long, round-winded question is what do you think when people decide, I don't like the system, Democrat, Republican, I'm just going to sit it out? Well, what do you say to that?
Well, first of all, when you say that, most people who say that have only lived in a democracy, meaning that you have lived in a system in which you have the ability every 2 years, every 4 years, every 6 years to vote for representation in our Congress, or in state legislatures, or in the local governments. But when you have somebody who has basically stated that they're not interested in leaving office after they lose office, a person that says, basically, I want to get rid of the Constitution, then that ought to raise a red flag for you, as that person cannot lead us forward into the 21st century. So basically what I'm saying is that we need to have a lens by which we can determine how are we going to participate. And at this point in time, the way you participate in this system is by voting. So here we are in 2020. We had people who came out in record numbers, and they made a different decision about what it was that we were going to do in terms of the presidential campaign. So we got new leadership. As a result of that, I think that it puts us in a position where we can go forward, because I think history will be very kind to President Joe Biden as it relates to what he was able to accomplish in the 4 years that he was in office.
Absolutely. I know you focus a lot on national politics in your book, but certainly you do make points about the local, state politics as well. What do you think about the state of Missouri here? There was a time when Missouri was a bellwether, a swing state, and that's kind of really gone away. That's become a deep red Republican state. Your insight and thoughts on that?
Well, I think that what you say is true, and I think that what people have got to do is to look at how do our representatives help us to solve problems. And when you have a situation where you have basically Republicans who are doing things that are not solving problems. I mean, in other words, just recently we just went through a period in which the government almost shut down. Well, that is not a governing position that we should expect people that we put into office to be doing. Shutting down the government is not a modus operandi for running anything. I mean, including your corporation. So can you imagine, me, applying for a job, and the person says, well, Mr. Blaine, what is it that you see yourself doing here? And I say, well, the first thing I'd like to do is shut you all down. So that's not realistic. And we need to have grown-ups in the room. And so what I'm saying at this point in time is that we have a system of checks and balances. And at this time, what we see is an erosion of the checks and balances that have been built into this system. Now that is dangerous, because what that is doing is foretelling that we're getting ready to move into a dictatorship. That's not something that we want to do. And so as a result of that, if you don't have a lens, a prism by which you can say, I'm going to do what I can do, and that is one of the things that you can do is vote, then you're not understanding the time that we are in right now.
So I guess the question becomes now, what's the solution? How do you refocus that lens, wipe the lens off, if you will, so we can see clearly what happens, what needs to happen?
Well,
where's the leadership on that?
Well, first of all, that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, to help you have a framework and a lens. But at the same time, if you just pay attention to what is being said by the candidates, that gives you a preview in terms of what's going on. And so if somebody is saying to you, I really don't believe in the system, and I'm getting ready to try to implement a dictatorship, and you don't have to take my word for it, you can look and see. So January the 6th was a straight line to what I'm talking about right now. So you had individuals who were in office, didn't want to leave office, and so then they were going to say that we were going to create an insurrection in the United States of America. That's not the way the system was designed to work. And so therefore that person and persons who contributed to that are not qualified to be, running the United States of America.
So as we wrap things up, visiting here with author Pierre Blaine, I have to ask you this too, in your mind as you study politics, and in particular this most different and just extremely election that is like no other, as you said. What's going to make people feel good about it when I get the impression that if the election doesn't go a certain way, there's a group that's already prepared to say it wasn't fair. Questioning the integrity of the election. And if that happens, your whole discussion about democracy, it does become a question, right? If people are, it's like if you go in a football game and you already say, if I don't win the game, it's because the officials have cheated me. How do you get past it? How do you go out and play that game? How does that work? I'm always putting a sports analogy spin on it, but how do you work that?
Well, I mean, in my former life, I was a basketball player, right?
Absolutely. St. Louis University.
And so, therefore, I played in those kind of situations. I have played in games in which the referees were a problem. You see what I'm saying? But the only thing that you can do is what you can do. What do you have control over? And so what I had control over was the way I played, and I was not going to be intimidated by what the refs were doing or what they were not doing. As Thurgood Marshall say, we have to do what we've got to do. And what we've got to do is to vote. We've got to build coalitions, and we have got to really, in my opinion, not allow 2024 to be a close race. We need to elect Democrats for the House of Representatives, for the Senate, and also for the presidency, because we now have a Supreme Court that is totally out of control. And what did I mean by that? They have taken away women's rights. They are taking away voting rights. And so you don't have to guess about what I'm saying. These are things that are actually happening. So when people are telling you that, Democrats are the ones that's cheating, you need to see and look at what the persons that are in power right now and what are they doing. They're making it harder for you to vote. They're demanding that voting places not be as plentiful as they could be, so that people are standing in inordinately long lines. So these are things that are actually happening in our face, right in front of our eyes, and we've got to pay attention to what it is that we're looking at.
Absolutely. And, the new book is called Civics for Our Time, author Pierre Blaine. Got to ask you real quickly, I know we're running out of time here, but locally, bring it back home here locally to Missouri. The race for U.S. Senate, Josh Hawley, Lucas Coons. What do you think about that?
Well, what I'm saying is that, in my opinion, we've got to put Democrats in office at the top of the ticket, the House, the Senate, and also in the White House, because at this point in time, we are dealing with a system of law, that is taking away our rights. So here we had women who, under Roe versus Wade, regardless of how you feel about that as a topic or an issue, are now in detriment and are dying because of that decision. And so then if you understand history, when people are talking about, well, we need to push it back to the states, well, if you understand states' rights and the history behind states' rights, then that is telling you that we want to go back to a slavery type of a system, because that's what states' rights meant. And so what we're seeing are examples of our rights being taken away. And so what I want to say is that what we can do is vote. My church, Washington Tabernacle, is going to be hosting a discussion on the Project 2025, October the 20th at Washington Tabernacle, which will be at 2 o'clock p.m. And so you can come and get some information about that. We need to vote, and we need to become a committee of one. And what do I mean? I mean that we need to expand what we're doing. So that means that we need to be doing more than voting. So what I have been doing is that, I've written a book. What I'm doing is I'm on your show. What I'm doing is that I'm telling people that we need to vote in this election. We need to be talking about how we look at the blue wall and make certain that the people that's in our families and our friends, that they get out and vote. And we have got to vote in 2024 so that we can preserve and protect our democracy.
All right. Pierre Blaine, author of his new book. It is called Civics for Our Time. If someone wants to pick up the book, what do they need to do, Pierre?
Right now, the book is available on Amazon. It's in an ebook format right now, and I'm currently working on the paperback and the hardcover right now. But right now, it's available as an ebook.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And your insight. Always enjoy it. All right. This is Kevykev. It's Kevy's Corner.